Here we go. This is episode 11 of Inside the Game on One Soccer and the One Soccer digital platforms. It's our Friday Junior show, but right about now, every day feels like Friday. So who's kidding who? Just do your thing, whatever you're doing right now. We appreciate you spending some time with us. I am Gareth Wheeler, basically your physical distancing BFF over this period. The response to these long form interviews we're doing here on the show, they've been great. We're pulling back the curtain. We're shining the spotlight on some of the brightest names and faces and personalities in North American football. And it's been honestly absolutely sensational thus far. And we're going to keep on going until the games are back on and coming out of this healthy together. Now, some good news, actual games look like they're about to be played in the Bundesliga in South Korea and slowly other places around the world as well. And fingers crossed here in North America, we're not too far off either. Like always, if you have a question for tonight, you can hit us up in the YouTube chat or hit me up on Twitter at Gareth Wheeler. There's so much to get into with tonight's guest, so let's get straight to it because really, seriously, he's an all-timer, both on and off the field. He checks both boxes. He's unquestionably, for me, the greatest American player of all time. His on-field play, it would take your breath away, bring you to your feet in an unpredictable kind of way at times. And that unpredictable style is fitting as his is a success story of a road less traveled. It's a career of self-discovery, one of greater education, not only about the game, but about life in general. Not everyone agreed with the moves or the decisions that he made along the way, but I mean, so is life, especially with people that get great acclaim. But the awards, the accolades, the fame, they cannot be ignored because this man has set the standard for American players present and future. His resume, I'm just going to read off some of this. It's incredible. 6 MLS Cups, a 2-time Supporter Shield winner. He's an MLS MVP, a Golden Boot winner, MLS Cup MVP. You get the picture. He was so good that MLS had to name their MVP trophy after him internationally. I mean, 57 goals for country, 5 coming at the FIFA World Cup. 4-time Gold Cup winner, a U.S. Soccer Player of the Year 4 times. He has done it all. And his wonderful career also marked by spending time in Germany as well as in the Premier League, where he left an indelible mark on Merseyside with Everton. His talent, the excitement he brought, it was something special. So from Europe to San Jose, he made his way down Highway 1 to Los Angeles and continued down Highway 1 to San Diego, where he is today, the new home of San Diego Loyal of USL, where he serves as head coach, executive vice president, and part owner. At the age of 38, it's quite the story that's being written. And based upon his persona and the way that he continues to impress and intrigue and garner interest, I cannot wait to see what the next chapter has in store. It's a pleasure to welcome Landon Donovan inside the game. How are you doing, Landon? I like the merchandise behind your back, the loyal gear looking sharp on you.
I have to say that was probably the single best intro I've ever heard. And by best, meaning it was really good for my ego. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm trying to stay on brand with the background. I'm not a big technology guy, but someone told me how to do that, so I figured I would do it.
Very cool. How did the Loyal name come about when you're conceptualizing the branding of the team?
Yeah, good question. So our founder, a gentleman named Warren Smith, founded a team in Sacramento called Sacramento Republic, also in this league, USL Championship. And what he learned along the way was that the way you create a club in a real way, in a genuine way, is you ask the people. And it's not really that novel, but it really makes sense. But nobody does it, right? A few executives come in suits and say, we want to name it this, and we want to do this, and we want to do that. The reality is long after we're gone, the club will be here. The people will be here who follow the club. So we wanted to make sure that that was the template we took. So we spent a lot of time speaking to people in San Diego, thousands of people in San Diego, and said, what do you want from this club? What do you want this club to be? And over and over and over, because of the not so rosy colored past of San Diego sports teams, the most recent, the San Diego Chargers football team leaving for LA, they said, honestly, we just want a team that will be loyal to this city and loyal to our people. We're sick of teams coming here and leaving. We hate it. And so we kept talking about different names and different ideas, and this word loyal kept coming up in all of our conversations, all the research we did. And we kind of looked at each other one day and said, well, what's wrong with SD loyal? It's different. It's not traditional, but it's a pretty cool name. You can't move it. You can't take this team anywhere. It's not LA loyal or Toronto loyal or Albuquerque loyal. It's San Diego loyal. And we just kind of had an epiphany. We ran it by the people we had spoken to. Everybody loved it, and off it went.
Very cool. Unfortunately, your season and USL and North American global sport has been derailed over the past few months. You did play 2 games of your inaugural season. You're undefeated thus far, Landon, I believe, as well. I mean, that has to be a little bit of a kick in the teeth for it to play out like that, because you have so much momentum building up with a brand new team. And how's everyone dealing with this hiatus and the untimely nature of it all?
So I'll preface it by saying life could be a lot worse, right? It could be on a ventilator, could be in the ICU right now, as many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So I just want to preface it by saying that. However, everyone lives with their own reality. And our reality right now is that it's frustrating because we got this thing off the ground. We were so excited to start. We got a little taste of it, and then it was kind of ripped away. So that's difficult. But one thing, it's funny how life works. One thing we've stressed from day one with our team and our staff is that let's focus on the things we can control. And when you tell yourself that a lot, it's amazing how little you control in life, right? This is a great example. There's so much beyond our control right now. And so we just deal with it. And we are fortunate. You're just alluding to it in the intro. We are now on Monday allowed to go back out in very small groups and start training again. So that's sort of the first piece of the process that hopefully will lead us back to getting to play, and most importantly, getting people around the world healthy again.
Are you and your staff and the players, are you ready for it? Is there nervousness, a reluctance around it? Like, where's the mindset right now, Landon?
I think it rests individual to individual. On a competitive basis, everybody just wants to get back out on the field and do what they love. This is what they love. They've grown up doing and playing their whole life, so they want to do that. But then from individual to individual, I'm sure there's some trepidation. Everyone's in a different situation. Some people may live with their parents or they have grandparents they see, and they're a little scared to be out in the world, and that we can deal with, right? If there are players who don't want to be there, there's no issue. I haven't heard that from our players. I don't expect to hear that, but I could understand people in all walks of life. Some people may say, I'm just not comfortable with it. I personally am okay with it because, we spent a long time with our guys actually up until mid-March before we knew what was really going on and before everything got shut down. So we've spent a lot of time together while this virus has been present. So we feel comfortable, like they're part of our extended family, but I can understand why some people in some walks of life would just say, I'm not comfortable being around strangers right now.
No kidding. I think that there is that desire to get sports back, just everything that goes into it, not only as competitors and people that are working on, performance and the operation on a day-to-day basis, but it's about the supporters. It's about the fans just rallying around a team or your favorite players in your community. It's that sort of thing that's sorely lacking right now. It's the USL is a really fun venture as well. Landon, I know that you were part of a group that was trying to bring Major League Soccer to San Diego. I mean, I was in Las Vegas, I believe it was last February, where I took in a preseason game between the Lights and Toronto FC. I met Flava Flav at the stadium. Like, Elvis was riding around on a motorcycle, and the quality of the standard of football was very good as well. What brought you to USL and being part of this hybrid role of ownership, vice president, and manager of the team?
So I moved to San Diego 4 years ago with my wife. We had a child. We had our first child, Talon, and we were living 2 hours north in Manhattan Beach, California. We drove down here one weekend to see her parents and to show her parents our new child. And we were able to drop our son off for about 3 hours and go have dinner. And by the end of dinner, it was our first 3 hours without a screaming baby in 3 weeks. And we looked at each other and we said, okay, I think we're moving down here. So we moved down here. We just said, we're moving down to San Diego. We need help. So that was the impetus initially. And then I've just fallen in love with this place. Anybody who's ever been to San Diego, it's hard not to fall in love with this place. And so my 3 loves are my family, soccer, and this city. And I wanted to find a way to marry them. And amazingly, for being the 8th biggest market in the country, there was no professional soccer team in the first or second tier of soccer in this country. And so it's been a little bit of a long slog, but that was my sole goal for the last 4 years. Unfortunately, it's come to fruition.
And has it lived up to your expectations thus far, just in terms of the setup, the arrangement, and making it a reality?
It's exceeded it. And the reason why, Gareth, is because the process is fun, right? So it was fun to have opening night, sold out stadium, all of those things that kind of happen at the end of that first process. But the process leading up to that and all the people I've met along the way, all the friendships I've built, and what we've been able to develop is what's enjoyable. And that's going to be the same going forward. Yes, every weekend presents its own opportunity to kind of prove yourself on the field, but it's the process during the week, not only with the team, but in an executive role. And then as an owner, you're constantly selling the club. You're constantly an ambassador for the club, but also for the city, because this is big for San Diego. So I'm loving it. Honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else right now with my life. It takes almost all my time, and I really love it.
Awesome. I love the branding. It looks great. I'm kind of surprised the people of San Diego didn't want it to be called the San Diego Ron Burgundies or Channel 4 News Team. Now,
They might have.
Imagine just having this big mustache on your kit. Could have happened, Landon.
Well, you never know. Like, you want to have credibility, but as time goes on, I could absolutely envision like some play on that would be fun, right?
I don't know, the Channel 4 News Team night down at the park. SDLoyal.com for more information about the San Diego Loyal. We have plenty to get into, and I kind of want to walk through your career. It's kind of funny. I found out, and this must have been back in, well, I'll say 2012, about your Canadian connection, Landon. And we're a Canadian broadcaster. And I actually found out because since 2005, 2006, I've been waging my own battle with malignant melanoma on and off. And I saw that you stepped up for this skin cancer foundation south of the border because your father was diagnosed with malignant melanoma. If you don't know, it's a deadly form of skin cancer, and you did work on behalf of that. And through the storytelling, I realized that your father just happens to be a Canadian transplant to California. So I just found it really interesting. One, that, wow, your father's, dealing with, and your family's dealing with something that is very personal to me, but there's also that Canadian connection there. How often do people ask you about that Canadian connection?
Not that often. I think because I was identified as an American soccer player, right, for so long and playing for the U.S. But I'm incredibly proud of my Canadian roots, really proud. And I don't know if it just has to be innate. I mean, I grew up with watching hockey with my dad. We would sit in front of a little TV and watch Hockey Night in Canada. And my dad grew up playing hockey, played his whole life. He continued to play until a few years ago. And that is his true love, is hockey. So I've always been really proud of those roots. And candidly, if I'm being honest, I was pretty zoomed out by this point, having done like 1,000 Zoom interviews in the last month. But when they asked about this, and I knew it was a Canadian, you were a Canadian group who broadcast in Canada, I thought that it's a source of pride for me. And so I wanted to share that. And I love that part of my ancestry.
Very cool. He's from the East Coast of Canada originally?
Scotia, yeah. He grew up in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia.
Wow. Have you been out there?
I've not. So that's one of my life goals, is to be, that is as Canada as it gets, right? That's real Canada. And so, grew up in Glace Bay, and all of his, in his home, he would always have, like a keychain or a picture or a book about Cape Breton Island, or about Sydney, or about Halifax, or about Glace Bay and where they grew up. And it's just always intrigued me. And a lot of them have migrated south to the States, a lot of my dad's family, but it's a huge piece of me, like a huge piece of my soul.
What's very cool is right now, I'm not sure how aware you are of this, but a brand new professional national league was established, the Canadian Premier League. Would you have any interest of coming up and being part of something? I mean, you're obviously part of San Diego right now. That's where your full attention is. I believe you have part ownership stake in Swansea Football Club as well. So does the Canadian landscape interest you, especially what you see going on up here in terms of the talented players available?
Absolutely. And it was really encouraging to see that league get up and running finally, because they've had Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and Major League Soccer for a long time. Um, but that only touches 3 provinces, right, in all of Canada. And so you wanted to see it spread. So again, this is a hard time for that league being in its second season, and now it has to put on the brakes, and it's not, it's not financially as secure as big major leagues around the world. So it gets getting hit really hard, just like other lower leagues are. But I absolutely am interested in that. I'm excited that there's a team in Halifax, that the Wanderers are in Halifax, and that I would love to help the sport grow there. I know Victor Montagliano, who is the head of CONCACAF now, I'm sure was a huge part of making sure that league got up and running. And now we need it to be sustainable, right? And keep that league running, because it's good for American soccer, good for Mexican soccer, and obviously good for Canadian soccer.
Victor was actually on the show Tuesday. It's funny that you bring him up. And you know what a tease this is for Canadian soccer supporters, because we've been hardened over time because of the lack of, accomplishments on the men's side of things, right? Like the 2000 Gold Cup, we'll have that, qualifying for the World Cup in 1986. But hearing that you have this Canadian connection, do you know what a tease that is for Canadian footballers to understand that the greatest North American player of all time, or American player of all time, could technically have played for Canada?
Well, yeah, I have thought about that from time to time. It never really occurred to me in my youth, once I was part of the U.S. national team. But as I got older, it was something I thought about. But going forward, to be honest, I'm a builder by nature. I love building things. It's why I was so proud to stay in Major League Soccer through most of my career, because I enjoyed the idea of building it and helping it get bigger. That's what I love about USL, right? MLS is always going to be a huge part of my heart because of what it meant to me. But this is an opportunity here in San Diego to build something, USL to build something. And I feel the same way about Canada. And nothing would make me happier, even though I'll get killed by the U.S. soccer fans, for the Canadian men's national team, because the women's national team has been successful for a long time.
Sure.
To get on par and to make a World Cup again. That would be a source of immense pride for me, and something that, competitively, I'm probably not supposed to do, unless the U.S. and Canada can make it, but something that I would love to have a hand in as well.
2026, right? Canada, U.S., Mexico, places that you've touched on all of them, and we're building towards that, right?
Yeah, I guess they'll be back in then. I forgot about that. So that'll be a powerful moment, just like the '94 World Cup was for U.S. soccer, having it here. But then to have World Cup games in Canada would be pretty special.
Kudos to you and the work that you've done with the Skin Cancer Foundation, and thank you for awareness, and obviously being in a place, whether you're in San Diego or Toronto or Glace Bay, I mean, it affects all of us, right? So kudos to you for the work that you've done and continue to do, Landon, on that front.
Thank you.
I want to touch on your past, because soccer, it seemed to have come easy for you as a kid. You were a natural. I believe you scored 7 goals in your first game that you played. Is that a true story? Did it be 6 or 7?
I don't remember.
An urban legend?
Yeah, urban legend. By the time I'm like 80, it'll be 11 goals. The reason why is I have an older brother, Josh, who's 5 years older than me. And from the time I could start walking and moving, he was playing with me because he had no one to play with. So I don't exactly know why he picked up soccer, especially at that time. It'd be like someone in Canada picking up soccer at that time instead of hockey, right? Like, why didn't we play baseball or basketball or football, American football? So I don't exactly know why he did that, but he wanted to play with me. So I imagine at that time, especially, I was kicking a soccer ball from the time I was 2 years old. So how far ahead of all the other American kids I was, who most didn't start till they were 8, 9, 10 years old. So I just had a comfort for the ball that nobody else did. So by the time I was playing as a 5 or 6 year old, kids couldn't even kick the ball, and I was used to dribbling it and shooting and scoring. So it was a little bit easier for me.
I think I read somewhere that you were involved in gymnastics as well. Were you a gymnast at that time as a kid growing up? No, were you not? Were you a football player? You were playing other sports though, weren't you?
I played other sports. So I probably did do like some version of casual gymnastics at some point, because we played every sport possible. So there was a stretch of probably 6 years where we played ping pong, table tennis every day, literally every day. any new sport that was in season, we would play. So when the NHL started in October, we'd go out and play roller hockey. When baseball started in April, we'd go play baseball. When the NFL started in September, we'd go play
Sure.
football. So that was just the way. I mean, if we knew the league was starting, we'd go out and play, and that's all we did all day.
So you flew through the youth ranks at the U.S. national, soccer level. Under 17, you scored 35 goals in 41 appearances, and the golden ball from the '99 FIFA U17 World Championship. I mean, it's quite the introduction. It doesn't come that easy to most people. Was it actually, or did it actually come easy for you?
It's a good question. I guess at the time it seemed easy, but it only seemed easy because I had prepared my whole life for that. So I wasn't envisioning that happening in my life, but that's all I did my whole life. All I did was play sports and play soccer my whole life. So when the moment came, I guess the differentiator was I was aware and I always was good at taking advantage of the moment. Right. So it wasn't necessarily conscious where I was thinking, this is my chance. I have to prove it. But I was so prepared and had done it so many times and practiced so many times that when the moment was there, I was excited and I just wanted to prove myself and go show it. And so I took advantage of it.
I mean, the path during the '90s was a little bit different than it is today because there's so many different academy and professional setups now, coast to coast across the United States and North America. You were actually discovered by Bayer Leverkusen in Germany when you were playing in a tournament overseas. Is that correct? I mean, was this part of your plan to get known, to have exposure, or did it just kind of happen?
So much like young players in Canada, growing up, they didn't, well, even till the last few years, growing up, we didn't have any professional league to look forward to, right? So there was no CPL, there was no Major League Soccer, there was no USL. So I didn't have anything to look to. The only thing I was looking to, honestly, was to go to college and get a scholarship so my parents didn't have to pay for it. That was my dream. In '94, when I was 12, Major League Soccer started, but I never really followed it. I wasn't that into it because I was just playing all the time. I wasn't a soccer consumer, I was a soccer player, right? So I just was out playing all the time. So I never had these grand ambitions or goals. And actually, this almost seems like unheard of these days because everyone's got an agent and scouts and all this. We were playing at a youth tournament with the national team. I think it was in Austria and maybe Italy. After the game, after one game, I was literally walking on the side of the field by myself, and this guy, random German guy, walks up and says, "Hi, my name's Michael Reschke, and I'm from Bayer Leverkusen, and we're interested in bringing you to Bayer Leverkusen." And my response was like, "What? Who are you? What? What is this?" This was at the time one of the best teams in Germany, and would become one of the best teams in Europe in a few years. And I literally had never heard of it. It didn't even occur to me that they played professional soccer in Germany. I'd never even thought about it. I was so naive and sheltered at that age. But then, as I started researching and learning about it, I thought, wow, I get to be a professional. This is and get paid for it. That's pretty cool. I love playing soccer. Why not get paid for it and be a pro?
So did it take convincing to move your life from the West Coast of the United States to the middle of Germany?
It took convincing my parents.
Did it?
Not, yeah, a little bit. So my mom's a special ed teacher. My grandma was a teacher. My mom taught special ed for 30 years. So she really wanted me to get an education. So in the end, I was 16 years old, and you don't really let 16-year-olds make decisions about their future because they're single-minded or single focused at that time.
16.
Yeah. She said, "Listen, you can go. The only thing is the contract has to be enough so that it'll pay for college if it doesn't work out. Other than that, I don't really care." So that was literally our negotiation. It was like, he'll go if you give him, I think it was 50 grand a year after taxes, 30 grand a year so that he can afford college. And he's foregoing a full ride scholarship. At that point, I would have gotten a full ride anywhere, basically. She said, as long as you do that, you can go. That was it.
Did you ever go back and get your college or university degree?
I did not, although I did take some classes. I
Uh-huh.
took a few classes to start, which I really enjoyed actually. And then life got in the way and kids and a job and all that. But I am a avid learner. So I took I believe it was a biology class, and then I took a political science class, which I actually really enjoyed because most of my high school I was focused on soccer. So I didn't really pay attention in class. I wasn't really interested in that, but now I love to learn. So those kind of things really interest me. So that was really enjoyable.
Well, good thing that soccer thing kind of worked out for you, Landon. You
Thank
made the
God.
decision to come back during the early parts of your career. It said that you just wanted to play football and be happy. I mean, how much of that was the competitive, being able to play on a day-to-day basis versus, just being more comfortable playing at home versus, a foreign place where, it's completely new for a very young person?
Sure. And there are challenges that come with that, right? But it goes back to what I said to you. I was not a soccer consumer. I didn't play soccer to make money. I didn't play soccer to be famous. I didn't play soccer because I wanted to play at the best club possible, the best name. I just played soccer because I loved playing soccer. So when I went to Germany, I played a little bit for the youth teams and a little bit for the reserve teams, but I wasn't getting to play in real soccer games, like, 20,000 people, real professional games. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why I didn't go to Germany to just go to Germany. I went to play soccer at the highest level. And so when that was clear that that wasn't going to happen, I called my agent and said, I want to get out of here. I want to go somewhere where I can play. And at that time, that meant going to Major League Soccer, which was the best option.
What's incredible is you cannot envision Major League Soccer without Landon Donovan, right? Like, you simply can't. Like, that wasn't just an incredible move for your career. It was an incredible move for Major League Soccer, which you yourself, like you said, you're a builder. You helped take that league to another level. I mean, I'm not sure if you ever think about this, but can you imagine a scenario with at that time if you stuck things out in Germany and what life would have been like, both in terms of what
Well,
MLS became and you yourself, the life that you potentially could be leading?
that's kind of you to say, but there were many people who factored in Major League Soccer becoming what it became. I hope a small piece of that helped move the needle. But I do sometimes think about what might have happened had I stayed in Germany. And actually, in retrospect, I wish I would have. Now, I'm glad the life worked out the way it did, and I'm proud of what has happened and what has become. And that was the path that was meant to be. But if I had had good advice from other players who had been through it, or if I were giving advice to my old self, which I like to do with young players now,
Sure.
I would have said, try to understand what this looks like long term, big picture, and know that this is very temporary, right? And if you're not playing at Leverkusen, that's okay, but maybe there's another club in Germany where you can go start to cut your teeth a little bit and learn. Because I was quick to get out of there because I wanted to be happy and play. But I think it would have been a good lesson for me to try to stick it out a little longer.
Was interesting because you said you weren't playing. I mean, I don't even know if you can compare the scenario facing players like Gio Reyna or Christian Pulisic right now, because they're actually featuring, like, they're playing on a regular basis there. So is the context completely different what they're going through compared to what you experienced?
It's not different. I just think they were better prepared, right?
Okay.
So this is hard to say, but I was very, very immature as a player until like my mid to late 20s. So everything I was doing was basically instinctual. It wasn't like really thought out or tactically smart. It was just instinctively I played the game at a very high level. But players like Christian and Gio, they've been groomed for this for a long time. Christian's dad was a professional soccer player. Gio's dad was a professional soccer, one of the best I ever played with. So they have been getting that kind of advice and being told, listen, the first 2 years you're there as a 16-year-old, you're not going to be anywhere near the first team, but just do this every day, train hard every day. And I never had that advice. So as a egotistical 16-year-old who thought he was a superstar, instead of understanding that this was part of the process, I thought, why am I not playing? I should be playing, which is so naive, right? The other part is those two in particular, they're so much further ahead of where I was at that age. It's not even close. I mean, it's really not even a comparison. Maybe physically and technically and in some ways I was at their level, but mentally they really understand what it's like to be a pro, and I was nowhere near there.
Well, your game clicked when you went to San Jose, played with our good friend, a gentleman in our own backyard with Dwayne De Rosario, with the Earthquake, some really great times there. And you mentioned that you do think about what things would have been like if you stayed in Germany. You were given that second chance because you initially came over on loan.
Yeah.
Did you feel resentment from the club when you went back? because they knew that your heart or head was maybe somewhere else at that time?
No, I didn't. They were very, very good to me, and I went in open minded, and they were open. It was a new coach, new coaching staff. Um, there was no. I don't think there were any hard feelings. I think everyone went into it thinking, let's try to make the best of this, right? Because I had proven myself in MLS, I had proven myself in a World Cup, in the Olympics, so they knew that I could play at a high level. The reality, again, to my earlier point, is from a maturation standpoint, I just wasn't ready. I was close, but I just wasn't ready. I didn't understand the game at that high of a level to be playing week in and week out against world class players. I could do it for 3 or 4 games in a World Cup because it was, again, that instinct, and I knew how to play in that way, but I wasn't ready for that. And I think that's why I go back to my point before. If I had stuck it out early on, I think I would have moved along that path faster, and it would have been easier to be ready for that at that point. But I just wasn't. And so we all kind of realized, listen, you're not ready. This doesn't make sense. You were doing great in America, seem happy there. Let's get you back there and make that permanent.
You had obviously immediate success with that very good Earthquakes team, and that kind of bridged your way to the LA Galaxy, where in a way, I'm trying to think the early days of MLS, whether there were those villains for individual clubs, because that's how you were portrayed in San Jose at that time, because you went to a rival, just down the highway. That's kind of what, breathes life into a league. You're not supposed to love every player. You're not supposed to love every club team that comes into your own backyard. What was it like being in the middle of kind of that delicate puzzle that was being pieced together? What was best for you? What was best for the clubs? And what was best for the league? Because it was an awkward time for San Jose because they were on their way to Houston at that time anyways.
Yeah. So it's funny because I never thought about this, but it's analogous to the U.S.-Mexico rivalry too. So if I take myself out of it, having had to live through it, it was amazing for the league that I did that. It was amazing for both teams that I did that, right? Because it created this animus that people like that draws ratings, that gets people to the stadium. People like that. Now, having to live it sucked. I mean, it really sucked. When I first went back to San Jose, my first game with the Galaxy, we went down for warm-ups. There were a lot of boos, a lot of nasty things said. When I was running back up the tunnel, or back up the ramp, all of a sudden I'm running up and something just nails me in the face. And a fan had balled up a t-shirt and just threw it right at my face and just hit me from like point blank right in the face. And at that time, it was horrible and it was, demoralizing. However, in retrospect, when I think about it, it's like, good, finally we're becoming a mature league and a grown-up league where people actually care to that extent. Now, did I want to deal with that? No, of course not. But it's also analogous to the U.S.-Mexico thing. When I take myself out of that rivalry, me sort of being a villain and some like Rafa Marquez being a little bit of a villain on their side, that was great for the rivalry because that gets people excited and gets people talking about it and watching it. And so I didn't always want to be the person having to deal with that, but in the big picture, I think it was good.
What if you go back up to San Jose today? How did they treat you? Are you still a villain there in your eyes because of the past, or do all your exploits with the U.S. men's national team kind of make up for it?
It's mixed, and usually time heals wounds. I have not had the opportunity, and I do want this opportunity to actually apologize.
Really?
Because I was young and I didn't understand what that meant for people, right? And for that club in particular, they ended up getting their team ripped away from them.
Yeah.
Right. So now, fortunately, it came, Major League Soccer went back to San Jose, but that was a really hard time. I mean, if I'm a fan of a team and all of a sudden it gets ripped away from me, and whether it's just or not, if you feel that part of the blame was because of should go to a player who left that might have helped the team stay, I would be pissed off too. And so I was doing what was right for me and my life and my family, but that also I realized impacted and hurt a lot of people.
Sure. I mean, and the Earthquakes, I mean, what that means for that community, there's history there in that city of professional football on the micro or the community scale. That really meant something, but really this was a time, Landon, where you really took off as a player And largely it happened with the U.S. men's national team. Like 2002 was just an incredible time, an incredible run, an incredible period for yourself. If you have one regret, perhaps it's that water fountain picture, taking a drink of the water, posing. What was with that photo shoot ahead of the 2002 World Cup? And was that suggested to you that you should be taking a drink of water out of this, and this would be a good glamour shot for you?
So unless you're capable of pulling up that picture right now, it doesn't exist.
We all have them. We all have them, right?
So I'll tell you the story. So before that World Cup, U.S. soccer was almost completely unknown, a tiny blip on anybody's sports radar. So leading into the tournament, we did a few photo shoots, some magazines, interviews, whatever, which was big for us. And at that point, it was literally any media is good media. So we go out one day, and I remember it vividly. All across like the 2 or 3 fields we were training on, there's all these setups with cameras and lights and goals and backgrounds, whatever. And so we do this photo shoot, and one of the photos at the end of it, and I'm a 20-year-old, right? So I'm like, I'll do whatever. I'm not ruffling. Actually, I was 19. No, I was 20 at the time. I'm not going to ruffle any feathers. So at one point they say, hey, let's go over to the water fountain and you can like take these like sexy pictures and, like people love this, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, sure, whatever. Never even occurred to me. Didn't even occur to me. Obviously now something like that would put red flags up, but didn't even occur to me. So sometime later, the magazine comes out and we see the magazine, I think it's on someone's computer, and there's all these very seductive photos of all of us. And we kind of say to our PR guy, we said, Michael, what the hell is this? Right?
Yeah.
It turns out, so it was for New York Magazine, and I think it was New York Magazine. And it turns out that New York Magazine had the biggest like gay readership in the country. And so nothing wrong with that, but we were obviously being exploited to help push their magazine. And in retrospect, I think it's great. Now the picture lives in infamy and it's kind of funny, but it was never explained to us what was going on. And I think we were all under the assumption that any media was good media. So we were just happy to do whatever. And it was a good learning lesson.
But it honestly created a platform where 2002 was just an incredible run where you upset Portugal, you score against Poland, 2-0 against Mexico. You score a massive goal that is one of the most famous goals in U.S. men's national team history. And then you end up making it all the way to the quarterfinals and lose 1-0 to Germany. And it was controversial. Torsten Frings, handball on the line. When you look back on that World Cup, do you think about all the high moments, all the positives, or do you think of what could have been? Because remember, on the other side of the draw, South Korea just upset Spain, and that was the game everyone was talking about. That draw opened right up for you guys. And honestly, the U.S. men's national team, based upon your form and how good you were, a World Cup final berth was there for the taking, really.
Pretty amazing to think about. So what people forget about that tournament too is that we were a few minutes away from not even advancing out of our group. So South Korea scored a late goal against Portugal in the other game, in our final group game. And if they hadn't, we wouldn't even have advanced out of our group. So a lot of things had to go right. We played our best game of the tournament against Germany, and probably 98% of my memories of that tournament are positive, and then 2% are what could have been, because we would have played South Korea in a semifinal to go to a World Cup final. We'll take our chances, right? But what I'm learning about sports and life, and now it's different as a coach, now it's similar as a coach, but in a different way, is that the process and the journey are what you remember. Yes, the results are powerful in the moment, but everything that happened leading up to that is what I remember about it. That's what I don't remember. The handball, I don't remember losing. I just remember all the good experiences we had that were so exciting. And that's what sticks with me.
Oliver Kahn was great that day. You were flying, Landon. And I mean, when you think about that game in general, do you think about the moments that were there to be had, or do you think of the Frings handball, a player that did play in Major League Soccer as well?
The Frings handball was a hard one because at the time there was no VAR, So we all assumed and kind of saw that it was a handball and looked like a handball, but you couldn't really blame a ref because it happened so fast and you didn't think. The one memory, bad memory or negative memory that sticks in my head is I had played at that point probably 100 professional games, maybe less. I had scored a bunch of goals in my life, and I knew when I took a shot, 99.9% of the time, I knew whether it was going in or not. Like most of the time I would start celebrating before the ball hit the net because you just know, like it goes by, your instincts know. So I got a ball on the right side of the field. I touched the ball through, I don't know who, someone's legs, dribbled into the box and took a shot. And right when it hit my foot and I looked up, I was starting to celebrate. And somehow Oliver Kahn reached out. And for people who are listening or watching, Google it. He reaches out and he gets a finger on it and touches it around the post. And I literally couldn't believe it because your mind and your instincts just know when you've done the right thing and it goes in. And I knew it went in. I knew it was in. It was in the goal. And all of a sudden it wasn't. And it was just I'm not sure it ever happened to me again the rest of my career where I knew it was in and somehow a goalie made a save.
Wow. I mean, it was quite the introduction to World Cup football for you over the course of your career. 5 World Cup goals. I believe that's tied for 34th all time. Don't quote me on that, but that's the same amount of goals as Zinedine Zidane. Like, I mean, you're an elite company. When you look back on your World Cup performances, what are you most proud of, Landon? Because there was highs and lows and everything in between.
Sure. I think the consistency, right? So I played in 5, 9, 12 World Cup games. To play in 3 World Cups is really difficult. It means you're doing something right over a long period of time. To play in 12 World Cup games in 3 tournaments means you're also successful in those World Cups. It wasn't 3 and out. That's the part I'm proud of because a lot of people come on the scene for a World Cup, maybe even 2 World Cups. But the guys I'm always most impressed by are the guys like DeMarcus Beasley, one of my teammates who went to 4 World Cups, the only American to do so, which is really, really hard to do. And I think speaks a lot about a person's character.
2006 was obviously a letdown, but 2010, you guys bounced right back. I mean, at this time, U.S. soccer is growing as well. I mean, this is a really good side with Bradley and Altidore and yourself. And there's some real talent in the team. Were you guys feeling the pressure, the weight of the nation, in understanding that what you did, whether good or bad, would be, analyzed and overanalyzed and analyzed a little bit more based upon how you guys performed?
We were beginning to, right? Because there still wasn't social media the way it is now. Internet wasn't as vibrant. Not everyone had a smartphone. So it wasn't, and we were on the other side of the world. So we were in South Africa. So we were beginning to, but nothing like it is today. So because of that, we were able to play, I think, with a little bit less pressure. But in the games themselves, you realize, especially as I was a 28-year-old at that time, you realize how vital it is. And so we tie our first game against England, get a little bit lucky when Robert Green pumped the ball into the goal. Yeah.
Could you believe that happened at that time? I mean,
at that level, you would never, ever expect that to happen. It was literally shocking to me. And then we get into our second game and we're down 2-0 at halftime against Slovenia. And at that point, if you go into your third game and you're sitting on 1 point, you're probably not advancing out of the group. So there was this urgency in the locker room that I very rarely had seen in my career, where we knew that 1, we better score quick coming out of halftime, and 2, if we don't get a point out of this game, at least, that our World Cup's over. And when you have that finality in a World Cup, it's pretty striking. In the course of a season, if you're in the middle of the season and you lose a game or 2 and you have 34 total games, it's not a big deal. But in a World Cup, it's like 3 chances and that's it. And if you lose one of them or you're not on your game one day, it can really set you back.
I was at Ellis Park that day. I was actually covering the 2010 World Cup. I was actually in Pretoria as well for your memorable goal against Algeria. I was in the stadium both days, and the Algeria won the 91st minute goal to send you through. I mean, for obvious reasons, that was a big moment. But in terms of the game, and it was a difficult World Cup because it was very defensive the way that it was played. That USA-Slovenia game was one of the most entertaining games of that tournament. And your goal really turned the tides. You come down that right-hand side. I still don't know what the Slovenian goalkeeper is doing till this day, hugging the post and not coming out, because you had no angle to shoot at. You almost took off his face. Like, were you even surprised that he didn't come off the line?
It was interesting because that exact play had happened to me a few times
Really?
in season with the Galaxy, in training, and then also in a game with the Galaxy. And I only remember it because that year in particular, it had happened a few times where I got in that position. And I remember asking our goalkeepers with the Galaxy, what's the best thing for me to do there? Because it's a really hard angle to shoot. If there's nobody in front of the goal, like, what's the hardest thing? And one of our goalkeepers said to me, he said, honestly, just nail it as hard as you can at our face. And there's a good chance we're going to move or duck out of the way or something, because we're human beings, right? So I was thinking about that, and I did it in practice and scored a goal just like that in training with the Galaxy. So when you get in that position, just so people understand, as an attacking player, your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth instinct are put the ball across the goal somewhere, because you're at a really hard angle. You're not going to shoot from there most of the time. But if you watch that play, I'm constantly looking across the goal, waiting for somebody to get in front of the goal. And there were no options. There was nothing. So finally, you can almost see in my eyes, there's a moment where the light bulb goes off, and I go, oh, I should shoot this ball right at his face. And I don't know why he didn't come out, but he also doesn't want to come out too much, because then you leave the whole goal exposed if I cross it. So he was probably just thinking, try to stay as big as possible. But my mindset quickly flipped to, okay, I'm just going to nail it as hard as I can at his face, and we'll see what happens.
See, for me, that was a more crafty goal. The second one, the way that was manufactured in desperation time, Howard throws the ball out to you, then you're on the break and Josie's involved and you come up and snatch that rebound. And obviously another legendary goal scored by you, but the one that, and I was in the stadium both days, I remember that goal against Slovenia more. I wonder how you kind of appreciate what you did scoring, because without that goal in that moment, you don't have that Algeria goal. You don't have the ability to get out of that group.
That's true. And just from a pure technical and soccer standpoint, the Slovenia goal is, I mean, on multiple levels, much higher degree of difficulty, right? The Algeria goal is a 7-yard pass into the net. That's any professional player can do that. But the Slovenia goal was definitely more difficult of the two. No
the other thing about your World Cup era that you and your teammates played, you guys always played Ghana. I don't know why. Like, you're always drawn up against Ghana.
I have no idea, and we could never beat them.
And they're a really good team. But I mean, in 2010, extra time, Asamoah Gyan, I actually met him at Sun City Casino a few days before, because they played Australia. I got my picture with him. We were just having a good chat. He ended up scoring the match winner against you. But yep. I mean, that was another game I feel like you guys should have won.
Yeah, it was a letdown. And it was always going to be tough, because the emotional roller coaster of the Algeria game, and then 3 days later, you've got to travel and play Ghana, a very good team. Yeah. So it was always going to be difficult. We didn't have the same pep, the same energy. Wish we could have got them on a different day, because I think we would have had a better chance. But to give them credit that they deserved, that was a really good Ghana team.
I mean, they were really good in 2014. You weren't at that World Cup, and I still, like, honestly, Landon, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, why you ended up not being included, but at a World Cup, when games are decided by moments, by such slim margins, I still can't reconcile it today why you weren't part of that side. Has Klinsmann or anyone at U.S. soccer ever come back and said, you know what, we really messed up? Because you could have been the difference in that World Cup as well.
Well, Jürgen has not. I've heard from plenty of people at U.S. soccer who felt differently than Jürgen did about that decision. But I can understand, I try to be very honest with myself and try to be compassionate and understanding of other people. I can understand why a coach in a given moment would say, I think there's another player who's better than you right now. But when you're thinking about a World Cup, you take 23 players to a World Cup. Most of the time, for most teams, not every player plays. So as you're building your roster, you think about, okay, if I need this in a certain moment, who can give me that?
What do you have? Yeah.
If I need a player who doesn't play a minute, but who can pull a 20-year-old aside and talk them through tactically something or a game or a strategy, that's super valuable. If I have a player who for 15 minutes I know can pull off a special play, that's super valuable. If I have a goalkeeper who's good at penalty kicks, That's super valuable. So there are all these scenarios, and I don't think, just from my, I don't know this, but it didn't seem to me like Jurgen really went through that process. It was kind of, if we're taking him at his word, I think this player is better than you right now. That's fair enough. That's a coach's
See,
decision.
but I don't believe that at all. Of course, for viewers, I mean, you took a sabbatical before, and I believe you missed some games, even though you scored the match-winning goal in World Cup qualifying that punched the U.S.'s ticket to Brazil. You deal with it in the game. You deal with it in life. People that either feel like you let them down or you didn't do enough and they know better. And that's kind of one of those scenarios where it seems, at least from an outside perspective, that's what it played out, that I'm going to show him and I'm going to show everyone that I'm in charge.
Maybe. I can't, I mean, we'll never know, right? Unless he comes out and says it. But I like, there are certain things you can control and certain things you can. That wasn't my decision. It sucked. I didn't agree with it. I thought it was wrong. I told him that. I told him there are players on this roster that you're taking to the World Cup that I don't think deserve to go for different reasons. At the end of the day, it's his decision, and you just gotta. Life sucks, man. That's the reality.
You've been a massive advocate for mental health as well. And obviously now it's much more in the spotlight. It's something that, we in sports clubs and sports leagues now actually take seriously, Landon. But you stepped away from the game in 2013, I believe, just to take some time for yourself. Was that more mental in terms of why it was necessary, or was it physical as well?
No, it was all mental. I had been playing. So at that point, I had gone on loan in 2009 to Germany, 2010 to England, played until end of December. It had only a 3-week break in 2011, and then gone on loan and played all year in 2012. So over the course of 4 years, I had a total of probably 5 or 6 weeks off. So mentally, physically, it takes a toll on your body, sure, but mentally, I was fried. And I knew if I didn't step away, that I was going to just quit altogether.
Right.
In retrospect, I really wish that people involved would have understood that a little better and had more compassion for me, because that was a hard time for me. But I also understand it from a coaching perspective or an ownership perspective. You were trying to get results, right? And if one of your best players is leaving and not there, that hurts your ability to get results. So I understand from that standpoint, but I wish people would have had a little more compassion.
I believe you went to Cambodia at that time. I mean, what did you do and what did you learn? And what sort of perspective
Uh,
did it provide you?
I did a whole lot of nothing. I laid around on a beach at a resort and relaxed and was just with myself. It was for 8 days or so. I just went and didn't think about soccer, didn't think about life, was able to just be a normal, forgotten about human being, like some people want to be at sometimes in their lives. I didn't have to worry about pressure or fame or games or results or any of that. I could just go be myself, and that was really valuable.
Do you think that that would be useful for other athletes, or is it a very individual to individual basis? Because it's very easy to get burnt out, especially in the footballing world, like NFL football or basketball or NHL. You have long off seasons, extended off seasons. The football world, I mean, with the international play and the nature of schedules, it takes a little bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point, because in other sports you do have an extended off season. So it is individual to individual. Some players say I could play 11 months a year for 20 years in a row and no problem, and that's great. Some players maybe won't admit it, but they feel that way too. And I I I can only affect my team now with this, and I can try to shed light on it. But if players feel that way, I am obviously compassionate and can understand why people need a break and to get. And it's not just soccer world. It's people who get 2 weeks vacation over the course of 52 weeks in a year, and sometimes they do that 5 or 6 years in a row, and they go, "God, I don't want to quit. This is my livelihood. I need to work, but I really just need a break. I'm just burnt out, and I need a break." And if just strictly from a business perspective, it's you'll get more production out of your employees by having compassion for them and letting them do that, letting them have a mental break, because they'll come back reinvigorated, and that's important. In my
Um,
opinion.
I completely agree with you. We have about 15 minutes here, Landon. We got to get into the Los Angeles Galaxy. I mean, you guys were the Manchester United, the New York Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, whatever, however you want to frame it, of Major League Soccer. What was it like playing on a team where you were a star among other stars, and each and every place you went, there'd be the biggest crowds on a weekly basis across Major League Soccer, and everyone was out to beat you and coming after you?
I thought you were going to say the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No, except the winning part of the equation.
No,
so.
I didn't necessarily want to get. So it was really exciting, really fun, really difficult at times. It completely changed the dynamic of our team and our players and our league forever, in mostly a good way. But we kind of felt, not quite to this level, but you kind of felt like rock stars, right? There was only one person they were coming to see with Beckham, but it was still exciting for us. And for a league that had relative anonymity through its first 11 or so years, to finally be put on the map was great. Now it was like 0 to 100 in 3 seconds, but it was really fun for us as players.
I mean, there was pre-Beckham Galaxy and pre-Beckham MLS. Then there was, MLS and the Galaxy with David Beckham. How did it change for you? I mean, you gave up the captain's armband at that time, but I mean, it wasn't just a footballer. It was a world global superstar that was coming into your room. And we had Alexi Lawless on a few weeks ago, and he spoke candidly about how things were different, how not everything came easy. Selling tickets, that was one thing, but all the other dynamics that came along with it, that brought something else.
Of course. Well, there's so many pieces of it, right? So think about David. He was playing for clubs like Manchester United, Real Madrid, AC Milan, playing for England, where he was always successful. I don't know what percent of the time, but he probably 70 or 80% of the time he was on the winning side of a game with those teams, right? Then he comes to the worst team in the league, in an inferior league that has really bad players. And all of a sudden, what are you supposed to do? And the spotlight's on you, right? So you're playing on this terrible team. You can't show your quality. Everybody's pinning the blame on you. Meanwhile, those of us who were expecting him to come in and not be a savior, but lift us and lift the level, he's grumpy, he's moody because we're such a terrible team. And it's just this spiraling out of control that's really difficult. And for 2 years, it was really hard on all of us. There were fun moments, right? But most of them weren't soccer related.
Sure. I mean, by all accounts, and I've met him a couple of times, Beckham is a great guy, but when you bring in a different dynamic, especially when you're trying to pull in the same direction and compete, and when you're trying to keep distractions out of the room, that's where the dynamic must have been most difficult, wasn't it?
Well, Dave, if you think about the way David plays, David's a facilitator, right? He didn't have anybody that could get on the other end of it, maybe outside of me and one other player, who could actually make his passing and his crossing and his abilities in that way effective. So, and then he was never, he works hard. He defended hard in moments, but he was never like a tactically astute defender, right? Just like I wasn't. So he didn't, what he was supposed to bring to our team was offensive moments that changed games. We didn't have anybody who could provide that, right? So it was a really challenging situation just from a soccer perspective to deal with that, because we didn't have the pieces around him to make him successful.
And you were a leader on that team. So how did you manage those moments, trying to keep the American or domestic players together at that time?
Not well. I didn't
Really?
do it. Because I got frustrated personally with David because I wanted more from him. And I think the reality was I just wanted more from the whole situation. It wasn't his fault in retrospect. And I said that to him later. But I also lashed out publicly, and in a not so good book that was written, I had a lot of comments that should have just been said to his face. And I told David that later, and that was really immature of me and not the right way to handle it, especially as a leader. As a leader, I should have found a way to make it as good as possible. We were never going to win a championship with the roster we had. We were never going to win a championship in 2008 with the roster and the coaching and the way we were set. It was never going to happen, but we could have made it better. And I didn't do a good job of that at all.
Did the book accurately depict what things were like at that time, though? I mean,
for the most part. Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't remember every piece of the book right now, but
Sure.
certainly whatever I said is what I said. The reaction of some of the guys is the reaction, right? That's the way people viewed it and handled it. But in the end, the alternative was being on a really bad team without David Beckham, and nobody wanted that. David was a great human being, great father, great competitor. And so why wouldn't we want him there? It was just hard because our team was so bad.
Right. Do you keep in touch with David at all? Do
We
you?
have contact once in a while, but I obviously follow what he's doing because listen, it would have been easy for him to take money, um, go back to England or go somewhere else and just be gone. And he's committed to this league for the long term now as an owner of Inter Miami. So I give him a lot of credit because yes, it's an opportunity and he's a smart businessman, but he could have done that anywhere. He could go anywhere and make more money or go anywhere and be an owner of a team. And he wanted to help this league grow. And I give him a lot of credit for that.
When you look back on your Galaxy days, I mean, you won 4 MLS Cups there. Do you look at that era in isolation and then kind of the rest of the time and put that all together? Like, is that kind of how it's kind of like a sandwich a little bit and the bread's really good, but
it was almost necessary for us to go through it because if we had just swept it all under the rug and we were all frustrated and we all just kept going down that rabbit hole, we wouldn't have rebounded in the same way and have the same conviction to win that we did. So once we were all under scrutiny, that book came out, we were all sort of being looked at in that way. David and myself in particular had this demeanor that was like, okay, fine. We're too good for this. We're too competitive for this, and we're going to win. And we did. We went out and won.
Well, coming out of that, I mean, in 2009, you were on MVP of the league. Like, you were maybe at your pinnacle of you playing as an individual. You went over, you made a loan move to Everton, and I remember you playing in the Premier League so well. I mean, you were electric, Landon. Like in 2010 and in 2012, you were the January Player of the Month at that club both times that you went. Tell me about your football at that time and what you were feeling, because you must have been full of confidence, and perhaps you wish in retrospect that maybe you were able to stay over in the Premier League and really gave that a go at that time. It seemed like you were a natural fit.
Well, 2009 and 2010 were the best 2 years of my career, no question, just the way I was playing. I loved my time at Everton. It was if you haven't been or you don't know, that is a truly special club. I mean, really, the history, the way that people treat each other, the way they support that team and that neighborhood is really special. And I feel honestly so grateful that I had the opportunity to share in that. It was a really special experience.
I saw you talking about it on a podcast with Tim Howard, another former Everton player, another USL owner and still player. He's still playing, Landon, putting you to shame over there. I guess he's a goalkeeper, so whatever. And Brian McBride, I mean, you guys had a very good team back at that time at Everton with Fellaini and Usmnt and Baines. You had some real quality in that side. What did you learn, about Premier League football at that time? And do you feel like you could have been not just a role player in a team, but really a leading man playing in the Premier League at that time?
Well, what I learned was the quality of just the football quality was much higher than I realized. I knew the league was fast and competitive and physical and athletic, but just the quality of players on that team was very high, very, very high. The other thing I learned is it is so difficult to keep that level up over the course of 30 plus games a year. And I gained so much respect, guys like Lampard and Gerrard and John Terry and guys who just did it game after game after game for years. I had so much respect for it because I played 10, 12, maybe 13 games, and physically I was exhausted. I mean, exhausted. It was really challenging in that way. But that is where a lot of my respect grew for all these guys, all the guys on Everton who just did it game in and game out. It's really hard.
But you produced as well. And this was a really cool time in the Premier League as well. It's kind of the height of Manchester United, and Man City started emerging at that time. What was it like playing in the Premier League during that period 10 years ago? I mean, it's not that long ago, but the Premier League was absolutely exceptional at that time.
Well, the first thing I did when I learned, or when the deal was getting finalized to go to Everton, was I looked at the fixture list because I wanted to see who
really.
And I don't remember everyone off the top of my head, but because sometimes the 2 years, 2010, 2012 blur a little bit, but I do remember Man City at home, Man United at home, Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Tottenham away, Liverpool away. So we had all these incredible fixtures, all within 3 months. And I remember just thinking, how lucky am I that I get to go over for 3 months and those are the fixtures. I didn't get like West Brom away and Stoke away and Hull away. I got some of those fixtures, which was amazing.
Very cool. You claim that you're an Evertonian for life. I take it you're still in contact with people at the club, still near and dear to you.
This stretch, there's not a lot of great that's coming out of coronavirus for most people, but this stretch has given me the ability to reconnect with people, probably the way a lot of people feel. And one of the conclusions is that it's time for me to go back. I want to go back and say thank you to all those people who made such an impact on my life and my career, and have a chance to just go sit and have beer and hang out in the pubs and like just go say hi to people again.
I take it you still watch. I mean, if you're an Evertonian for life, I mean, how difficult is it watching Liverpool's dominance right now?
Well, unfortunately for them, they still may not win the Premier League this year. So
yeah, as a United supporter, it's been tough the last few years. So I feel your pain. On October 10th, 2014, your 157th and final game with the U.S. men's national team. Do you still look at that night fondly? What are your memories? I mean, 50 goals, 50 assists. I mean, the photos, if you just Google it, I mean, you could see the real emotion there, Landon.
Yeah, so I had started as a 15-year-old playing youth national team games. So if you fast forward to almost 20 years later, getting the opportunity to play my final game in front of a crowd like that, that was so adoring, was really special, particularly after what had happened with the World Cup in 2014 and not going, because I didn't want that to be my last experience. Sitting on a chair being told you're not going to a World Cup when you dedicated your whole adult life and career to helping the national team improve. So I was really glad that I had the opportunity to say goodbye, to say thank you, and to just feel that kind of love and emotion from everybody was really special.
Incredible. What an international career. Your career didn't end there. 2 retirements, Landon. You came out of the broadcast booth to play with the Galaxy for a stretch run. You played for Club Leon in Liga MX. San Diego Sockers. I know lots of people hearing San Diego Sockers outside of Southern California might not realize this is an indoor soccer institution, a dynasty back in the day. And you were playing, I believe, their last year and still banging in the goals. 2 retirements as well. How difficult was it to stay away and not play anymore?
Well, actually it actually wasn't difficult from a soccer standpoint. It was difficult from being around the teammates, the games, the actual games, but the idea of going back and training every day for a year and those kind of traveling and all that, not appealing at all. But having the opportunity to go help the Galaxy when they desperately needed it in 2016, they had a rash of injuries, was really, really special for me and important for me to do. Having the chance to experience Liga MX with my family and going and having my kids learn a new language and having an experience like that was great. And then the Sockers, I played indoor soccer growing up, and I watched the Sockers in the stands and just thought, how cool would it be to play that game? And when I got the opportunity, I jumped at it. I thought that would just be such a fun opportunity to relive my youth a little, no pressure, just go enjoy it and get to play like a kid again.
Very cool. Which brings us today. Now you're, as we mentioned, with the San Diego Loyal. I just have a big picture question in terms of the North American sporting landscape. Obviously, the MLS MVP trophy is named after you, and now you're part owner and head coach and executive vice president of a USL club. What do you make of the structure right now in North American soccer? Canada as a league. There's MLS. There's USL. There's NISA. There's all different leagues. Are are they all working together enough for your liking, or does there need to be more of a streamlined approach to make it easier for supporters and fans to follow along?
I think it's very confusing if you're not in it, right? So for me, it's easy. For you, it's easy. You understand it. For most
Yes.
people, they go, what is this NISA? What is USL League One, USL Championship, MLS, CPL? They don't really understand it. And I understand why it's confusing. I would love to see it more streamlined, to be honest. I would love to see it more streamlined so that everybody sort of understood where they were in the picture. But the problem is without a promotion relegation, it's really hard to do that. It's difficult to do that.
Sure.
And I don't believe promotion relegation at this time would be right for everybody. Although as a fan, I would absolutely love it, but I don't think it makes smart sense for us. Forget about the business side, just to keep soccer growing in this country. I don't think it makes sense yet, but at some point in the future, absolutely.
So with USL in your venture, is the goal just to make USL and your clubs a clear tier two option in American soccer, or are you competing against MLS? I'm just curious where both leagues, their trajectories are going to go and how all these pieces fit together.
So I can only speak from my perspective. I can't speak for the league or what anyone else thinks. Just the way that the leagues are structured financially, MLS is, well ahead of USL, as it should be, right? USL, I guess potentially could get to that point someday, but it doesn't make sense really to have two leagues that are competing against each other in that way. It's, the NFL has tried to do it, or the NFL hasn't tried. People in American football have tried to do that. It just doesn't make sense. There are only so many eyeballs that want to watch soccer. So it's okay to have relatively comparable leagues, but there's a hierarchy I think is necessary so that people understand the landscape. But I will say, fans of USL teams appreciate their USL teams as much or sometimes more than MLS teams fans
Sure.
do. USL teams mean as much to their communities and sometimes more than MLS teams do. CPL clubs mean more to their communities sometimes than MLS clubs do, right? Halifax is the only show in town besides hockey, right? Like junior hockey or whatever's going on. So Halifax Wanderers mean as much to that community as the fifth or sixth sport that Major League Soccer might be in New York. Right now, the Red Bull and NYC have done a great job, but they've got the Knicks, the Bulls, the Islanders, the Rangers, whatever, the Mets, the Yankees. So it's hard. So there is still real meaning in all these communities for these USL clubs. No
Well,
question.
it's been having called USL games in my past. I mean, it's great to see the league expand. Some great new markets, including San Diego as well, and the exposure now on ESPN and beyond. There is some real growth proposition there, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward with San Diego. Let's wrap things up really quickly. It's kind of a rapid fire segment that we do with former players, Landon. We're calling it the best five. So I'm going to ask you your best blank, and you just fire it off. And then we wrap things up and send you on your way. So this week's best five, the best player that you've ever played against.
Messi. No
Messi?
question. Yeah.
Did you ever play? You played against Cristiano Ronaldo, didn't you?
I did. I played against both. Cristiano was athletic and powerful in a way that no other player ever was. The way Messi moves with the ball, I remember we played against Argentina, I think in 07. At the Meadowlands in New York. And there was a play where four or five of us, he's in the middle of the field, and four or five of us, I mean, very consciously, were just trying to foul him because he was getting on a little bit of and 4 or 5 in a row hit him and would just bounce off, and he would just keep going somehow. And it was like he was superhuman.
Crazy.
Crazy.
The best teammate you've ever had.
DeMarcus Beasley. I played with him. I started playing with him when I was 15 years old with the youth national team. Guy who never cared about getting credit, wanted to be the best player on that side of the field and lock down that side of the field. And all he cared about was winning. That was it.
And now I believe that he's pursuing his own club in Fort Wayne, I think, where he grew up. The best game that you ever played in, or your favorite game?
Question. Probably this is way deep in the archives. 2003, LA Galaxy came to San Jose to play us with the Earthquakes in a playoff game. And we were down, we played 2-game aggregate series. We were down, the Earthquakes were down 2-0 to LA Galaxy. And they came to San Jose. They scored 2 goals in the first 13 minutes. So they were up 4-0 on aggregate against us after 13 minutes. So we had 77 minutes left. In 77 minutes, we scored 4 goals, tied the game 4-4, and then won it in overtime.
Amazing. I thought you were going to say the pickup game that we had when you were up for the 2018 MLS Cup in Toronto with you and Dunfield and Stu Holden.
That was a close second.
I think I came in for the last 10 minutes and I ruined it. It was in the running until that moment. The best coach you ever had?
I think just based on longevity, Bruce Arena. He's the best man manager I've ever had. He could be a CEO of a corporation easily, a Fortune 500 corp. He just understands people. He understands process and how to get things in motion and organized. Just very, very, very good in that way. But I was fortunate to play for a lot of good ones.
And finally, your best or favorite footballing moment?
Of mine?
Of yours, yes. There's been a lot of them. Some people I asked, there might be 1 or 2.
Well, for what it meant for U.S. soccer, the goal against Algeria, that's not necessarily my most important or favorite moment. Probably walking out the tunnel in my first World Cup game, because I was very conscious of how special that was for a kid who grew up in a 900 square foot home with a single mom and really had nothing in their life, grew up eating macaroni and cheese and hot dogs and grilled cheese. And I was very aware that this was pretty surreal to have made it that far. And that was a really special realization.
That is today's best 5. All great answers. This has been an incredible interview, Landon. Thank you so much. We kept you a little bit longer, went into extra time, but that's kind of apropos for your career. You're used to it by now. Again, sdloyal.com. Where else should people follow you or get information about what's going on with you and your club, Landon?
That's fine. Just mainly support soccer. It's a beautiful sport, and if for people listening or watching in Canada, support your local team, support that league, because it's a great game, and Canada's on the verge now of becoming a power in this region, and I think that's important to all of us. So
beautiful.
Support.
Well said. I just want to get online and get some of that SD Loyal merchandise. I'm a dog guy. My dog's wandering around my feet right now. Beautiful kid. And if you can't tell, orange is kind of my color. Landon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. Best of luck moving forward, and hopefully good luck at training come Monday as we kind of move forward with this. So the best to you and yours. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
The great Landon Donovan joining us here on Inside the Game. We'll be back next week with brand new episodes. A reminder, subscribe to us on YouTube. The Hangout each and every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy hour with a focus on women's football with the ladies, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday nights. And we'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of Inside the Game. I want to thank Landon, everyone at San Diego Loyal, Armin, David, Kurt, thanks to all of them. And thanks to you for tuning in. And a reminder to stay home and stay safe.